Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society in general. I am Father George Ehusani, and I have with me in the studio a young person, Onize Ohikere. You're welcome.
Thank you, Father.
Onize, Onize is a journalist, is an international correspondent for World News Group.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
It's American-based.
Yes, US-based.
So you are here, and you are working for a US-based. So you guys, in this digital age, you can actually be here and be working and earning your salary from an American organization, right?
Yes, Father.
That's great. And so many people are doing that kind of work now.
It's the new go-to for most people who are able to get it. Most people are hoping for it, actually.
I mean, I see many people. There's a group, young people. In fact, there's a couple. You will get to meet them. They're going to wed in this year. And both the young man and the young woman, they are working from home. They are working from home. They are helping to process some things in the US and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So we need more Nigerians to get jobs like that and earn us dollars.
Yeah, I mean, with the information, though, I feel more and more people know it's an option and are actually looking for it online, and across different fields. It's not a situation where before you say it's just STEM, science courses, across, this is media, mass communications. Yes. So it's across the board. It is.
That's good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now we are here today. What did we discuss the last time? You recall?
It was about young people, so I'm trying to remember the topic. People.
Today, actually, it is about the iPad generation. You know those that are called iPad generation? iPad came about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So iPad generation are the children that are between 10 and 15, and were born, and within 2-3 years they are using iPad, right?
Correct.
The iPad generation. What is the future? A lot of things are going on internet now showing that children that were introduced to the screen very early in their lives, introduced to the iPhone, to the iPad, and they are working on this thing from age 2, 3, 4, that there are serious problems as they grow up. That while they become very smart, while the cognitive dimension of their brains are very well honed, very well developed, but that their social skills are hampered.
Yes, right.
And that often they don't know how to relate with people. They have grown up only relating with machine, and that sometimes they are more robots than human beings, in the sense that those human things, affection, sensitivity to emotions, what makes us really human, that our iPad children are beginning to lose a lot of that.
Yes, right.
And that they become very impulsive, throwing tantrums. They are not able to, they get addicted to these devices. And that you cannot tell them, oh, put away that iPad and come for your lunch. No, they will go to the lunch table with the iPad. What's going on?
This is because I'm thinking back to when we were younger, early 2000s, when to access the computer, you might have one desktop at home, or you have to go to some store somewhere or shop to learn how to start typing. So it was different. But then once that came, and we already knew, like we were talking about earlier, we knew we're behind compared to other countries, right? So when it came, I feel like many parents saw it as we're finally catching up. So there was this huge openness, let them use it as much as possible to give them more opportunities, the more tech savvy.
So because we have even telephone, we didn't have.
Exactly.
Because we have lacked telephone, we have lacked iPad, all this. So when iPad came,
it's like, let's rush to catch up.
Elite parents wanted to catch up.
Exactly.
And started overdoing it.
We're now getting to the point where we're able to, like you're saying, 10, 15, that's the age group where they're now teenagers. So you're starting to see the repercussions of whatever foundation you've given them, and we're starting to see that just like anything else in this life that you have access to that is wonderful, moderation is important. Regulation helps to avoid slipping over to the extreme. Maybe we were at the other extreme before where we didn't have access to it. But now we've gotten ourselves to the point where overindulgence, and it comes with its own implications, right? Have a situation where you're collecting from a kid and the kid is throwing tantrums, and the only way you can stop them is by handing it back. There's a problem.
Breaking things in the house, Nothing makes sense until you give the child. That's called addiction.
Addiction, and it's the same thing we're saying. One of those things where, again, you won't, the phrase we've used over and over again, you won't throw out the baby and the bathwater, right? It has its advantages, but the point is, if we're starting to see that the negative implications that's what's everywhere, then we need to certainly put some steps in place. We're talking about, I know there are families now who in the home regulate it, because at first people were talking about, okay, in school they have access to it, or they will tell you, well, they need it for their assignments, or it gives me a break when we come back home, I can prepare lunch or sort out other things while they are on that. But now parents are realizing that half the time it's not like before that you can talk with them and you know who their friend is in school. There's a whole nother world online, and you won't know of whatever or whoever they're interacting with unless you've already established a relationship with your child, or you're monitoring what they're following or what they're doing.
Is it true that actually children as young as 1.5, 2 are already...
They would open, we see this over and over, even with nieces, nephews. You see, they take your phone, they can unlock it, they can access everything. They know how to go to their games, how to go on YouTube, how to go to the recently searched videos. So again, they are learning these things because it has become part of our way of life, right? Even with us, same thing with adults. When people used to say children should drop their phones, they started showing videos of adults at restaurants and everyone around the table is on the phone. So whether we like it or not, there's a culture in place. And just like you would inculcate a culture or indoctrinate a child into any culture, it's the same thing happening here.
It is said that when there is a major shift in culture, when there's a major cultural shift, you don't get to know the implications for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But perhaps when it comes to iPad kids and the iPad culture, we're already seeing the repercussions. It's clear that teenagers have a problem, especially elite teenagers, not poor village slum children, but elite teenagers have a problem. Impulsiveness, lack of attention, inability to drop that device and concentrate on something else, and even the attention span, because these things and devices change every
just open the next video when you're bored. Click on the next video. But even the aspect of even morality, because I think this is one that from a few parents, I think finally got parents starting to question, right? There's this popular game among kids, I think it's called Roblox. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but I think it's Roblox, where, you're live chatting with kids, with other players. And I experienced this one with a family member, a cousin, who had to deal with it with her child. She already had an established relationship with him, and he basically told her about a message that because there's a live chat, so you can chat with other players, right? A message that another player sent to him, and he knew it was inappropriate, so he closed it.
What age of child are we talking about?
He, at the time, might have been 7.
7.
He might have been 7, but some kids younger play it as well. And so because of the foundation, he knew that was wrong, and he closed the chat and told his mom. And so for her, that was an opportunity to go back and think, is it even okay? Because again, you're dealing with parents who have no experience whatsoever with this. This was not their foundation. So the experiences of their kids, those who are able to interact with them and have established that relationship, is what's helping some of them go back and look and be like, maybe something needs to change here. Because think about the kids who have no regulation or no established relationships. Different kinds of crazy things can happen in those chats.
The video that we shared,
yes,
Oprah Winfrey and somebody, and that lady literally summarized it all. She talked about the fact that these kids are impulsive, these kids are, on account of social media and all the promptings, these kids are instant gratification. They are kids of instant gratification. You can't delay any gratification. And competitiveness, materialism.
Yeah.
She says all the negative things we should be running away from is what this social media promotes among kids.
I think the delayed gratification for me has been the best way I've been summing this whole thing up, because even if you look at those of us who didn't grow up with access to all of this, the same core values, and I think for me that's the takeaway, the same core values are underlined across the different generations, right? We were kids, you want to go out and play, we are hearing the neighbor's kids, but your parents have established a rule. You're not going out before 2 p.m., for instance. So no, or you must do,
you must return after
or
7
return
before 7 p.m.
or you must have swept the room and finished that chore before you go there. And we'll grumble like, there's no point of this, I clean the house every day, why are they forcing me to do this? But you do it. And it's not necessarily about that action, but it's the implication of what it means to you. Obedience. You're learning to hold on,
and
delay. You're not getting everything you want instantly. And I understand that it's hard to do when, like I said, you're watching a video and I can click it. There's nobody pinching me when I click the video, so that I learned that I shouldn't do that. So it's right there. So that's now where the responsibility falls on the parents. There are many, I spoke to a colleague too on Friday, spoken to a lot of others, and there are ways even within these systems that parents are learning to set up that same method we had when we were younger of putting, restrictions on certain things. Some don't give them full access to the media at home. Some only during the holidays. Some regulate the hours during school time. Some even down to even if they let them watch TV, they strictly monitor the programs they watch.
But that is for children that have not become addicted.
Exactly.
Now, those that were exposed to this thing when they were 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, that by 5 they are already addicted.
It's a winning process at that stage.
It's a serious
You have to
issue.
win at that point because it's almost like a lot of parents tell you now they're at a quandary, right? They're struggling because some of them, like you said, they've started at that age from 2, they're getting to 5 to 6, and they're realizing that I might have made a mistake because this child, I'm looking and all I've used for my peace of mind for a long time has just been to hand this iPad to them. But now you're starting to see that you can't even hold you're talking to them, they're not answering you. You call their names, they're not answering you. So it's one of those things where at the end of the day, you have to, it's like when you're stopping a child from breastfeeding. The mothers I know, you mentally prepare yourself for a couple weeks of chaos, meaning that child will cry a lot before they adjust to the fact that that's not my feeding method anymore. There's a new reality for me. And to an extent, that might be the same solution here.
Well, when it comes to addiction, the kind of thing we saw in that video, when it comes to a real addiction, if it is how the mother wins the child from breastfeeding, that won't do, because you are dealing with something that has something in the brain has been damaged. The neurotransmitter called dopamine has been so messed up that simply using the mother's winning method cannot help. Unfortunately, in some societies, you need psychiatrists.
Actually, yes. I was talking to you about this. It's kind of connected. The pandemic period was a very good, in my opinion anyway, very good trial period for the implications of these things because everybody was home and the level of access both adults and especially children had to social media and all of that was way more extensive than it normally was because everybody was locked up at home. So full access. And I was mentioning it earlier, a colleague of mine worked on a story last year that since post-pandemic, social psychologists and neurologists were starting to report more mental health issues linked directly to social media use. One example she really centered on was TikTok and Tourette syndrome, when people have tics, like they're talking and they react or, say different random things. And there were a few social media users, influencers, who had them and were talking about them. And so many kids started to diagnose themselves with it. A woman had to call emergency workers to her home because she genuinely thought her daughter was having seizures. And the daughter believed she was having seizures. So like you're rightly saying, winning at that level would do nothing. They had to go and seek psychological support.
In some countries now, Japan and a few other countries, they actually have social media rehabilitation, social media addiction rehabilitation centers. So, because it is understood as serious problem, serious addiction. As we said earlier, while people in the West, in Europe and America are becoming aware of this and are beginning to scream that they need help, many people here we are still celebrating these devices.
We're not there yet.
And when we will get there? Is it when all our young people are damaged? Okay, not long ago, I think it is early this year, there was a discussion in the UK Parliament on this, on ensuring that there is no Wi-Fi in elementary schools and making sure that children don't go to school. They wanted the law to permit the schools to stop iPhones being brought to school. so that children can be there without.
Yeah.
While that is happening, our own place here, people are celebrating the fact that 3, 4, 5-year-old children who are in foundation, who are in nursery school, that they have iPad. And the school is even claiming that, oh, they are celebrating the fact that we give our children assignment to do on iPad. Well, you are destroying those children. Because the people like Steve Jobs that produced iPad said he will not give his child the iPad.
Exactly.
Because he knows the damage.
And I think it's one of those things too where we have to realize, like, there's nothing wrong with setting an age. Even if, whether or not you're doing gradual exposure or setting an age where the child starts to learn how to use those things, you can ensure that they're not at a disadvantage. And the other thing too, even in terms of responding to it, is I always believe in many of those places too, and other countries you mentioned, they adapt to their own culture. Are there ways, the African ways of growing up, is it the kids, how we play around and those games? Can you incorporate them?
Okay, say you don't want to lose out and then you put your child into this. But the child is losing out in fundamental human issues.
Exactly.
The child is supposed to go out and play. Something characteristic of children is play. Let the child go out and play with other children. A person playing with himself is not human. So the person holds the device and for 4, 5, 6 hours is playing game with himself. That's not correct. Let the child go out and play with other children. There are so many skills they learn. They learn skills of conflict negotiation, conflict management. They learn how to fight and forgive. They learn emotions, how to read the emotions of their peers, of their other people. They begin to understand their own emotions. None of this. All this you don't learn when you are just with your iPad.
And I do think there's still room for creativity with these things. And I think for me, that's the heart of the conversation. No one is saying trash everything. When you see there's a problem, are there ways you can look back, the things you can pull back that were good and helpful? Within the play, are there ways you can even, because I think back, I keep forgetting the subject in primary school, something like world affairs or something like that, ways that you can still keep your children informed about what's happening. Are there projects you can give them, make them work in pairs without
particularly make
typing.
them work in groups?
Let them go back to cardboard and cutting papers. Good. Or if you need them to research, can it be parentally monitored?
Nature, let them go back and play with sand, play with leaves, play with grasses, watch that ant crawling on the ground.
Yes.
It has something to connect us to nature. The iPad does not connect you to nature.
We talked on the side about this, even homeschooling. There's a mom I spoke to for a separate story last year, I believe. And that was part of the course. She would take her kids out. And they're like, oh, mom, see a caterpillar and, what is this? And then when they go back home, monitored research together about that specific. So the focus is not necessarily on the pleasure you're getting from that research, from the device you're using. The attention is focused on what they saw outside. And everything they are doing on that device is specifically for the original intent. So those are some of the ways of balancing it, where it's not your primary focus or primary goal. Let it be secondary, so you have other things that are pulling you there if you need to. Again, parent monitored research. Back then we had labs and digital libraries. Are there ways to regulate it? Very narrowed down. Or instead of some of those things, can they go out and even talk to each other? There are ways to sort of bridge the two together that does not put the kids at a disadvantage.
Unfortunately, a lot of damage would have been done before sufficient number of people recognize that this artificial life cannot, it has too many risks, that though maybe the parents who thought that they were poor or they were not well endowed when they were growing up in the village and they were running after rats and they were playing with other children in the village in the sand and so on, those are things that actually prepare people. Resilience, for example, you build resilience when you have challenges and difficulties. But if you have everything at the touch of the button, you don't build resilience.
I think that's something we're starting to realize. There was a video that circulated a while back where a man was talking about how, his father struggled so hard. he saw his father struggling really hard to give them a better life. So he got the better life. So he struggled a bit, so he could see the implications of that struggle. So when he got to a better place, he made it so comfortable for his children because he didn't want them to suffer what he went through, forgetting that there were some good core values that he learned there. So he took it up completely. And then those children grew up and had nothing to offer. And their kids now, so it's almost a very vicious cycle. So those kids who suffered now return back to base.
No, you know about the camel and so on. Say the grandfather rode on camel, worked very hard, and then the father rode on a car. And then worked very hard, and the son riding on a private jet. But the son never worked hard in his life because he's just enjoying the fruit of the father's something. And the son lavish everything, destroy everything, that the great-grandson now is going back to ride on a camel. Exactly.
So it's like, if instead of subjecting ourselves to this cycle, why not find a balance in between? Like you find, I mean, some parents and young adults, friends I know who are thinking of starting families, talk about it where it's little things, you know, in the practices you teach your child. When they do a task, explain the process to them. When they have an assignment, explain the process. Let there be some denial for actions. They are not just denying and walking away. You're explaining to them why this is happening, why this is being taken away. When there's a reward, they understand you're getting a reward and the reason why. Even in terms of handling finance, it cuts across the board.
Did you hear about, in the video you watched, about the fact that we are attempting to take away all pain? And that if you take away all pain, you have destroyed.
There's nothing left. Exactly. So again, is all moderation and balance. If you can't take away all pain. All you're doing is numbing, which is what they talked about in the video. You become so numb to everything, which is a worse state than dealing with issues. Like you said, it's what builds character. A lot of us talk about, even right now, the issues with boarding schools. I mean, again, there's a whole spectrum. Some might have been completely terrible in the experience, but those where, you know, you have to wake up at a certain time. You have to learn to fetch your water. You have to so some of those core things. And you find certain parents now who are drawing that same balance we're talking about, where if they're keeping their kids in day schools, they create that structure at home. The child knows when to wake up. They know work with them to create a personal study timetable.
It's very interesting when I see 10-year-olds go to secondary school boarding. They go in September. By the time they come in December, they are half of the weight.
That's step one.
Because they go to, and then they see this regimentation. They eat 3 times or 4 times or whatever a day. They cannot go to the fridge 10 times a day to pick something.
Just walking, exactly.
So there is some limitation. And you see when some of them come out, you see how lean they are and it is good for them. It prepares them for the real world. For the real life.
And when the parents, you start noticing, I mean, I remember this from our time where they will tell you, you start laying your bed by yourself. I don't have to chase you around the house to lay your bed. Why? Because that child had bed inspection every morning. So it's sort of those little things. If you're in an environment where you can't do that, that balance, what are the ways you can adapt some of those values and bring it into your own home and your own space for the sake of that child?
We need creativity. We need certain ground rules. For example, it has been said, researchers have come out and said, look, children 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 have no business with these devices. So that's one of the ground rules, that these children have no business, because these devices are addictive and their tender brains are still too tender for you to harass them with these things. Don't expose them to this. And then our schools, the elite schools that are competing in this thing, tell them to bring children out into the garden and let them be in touch with nature and not with devices. So those are some of the things. Then you now regulate. When they get to 10, 11, 12, when they can use the devices, you now regulate how much time. The video you watch says that a child under 12 should not be exposed to any device more than 2 hours, isn't it? No screen more than 2 hours in 24 hours.
Well, beyond that, to be honest, we are.
No, I'm saying children.
Yes. No, so it's at the end of the day, it's what we're talking about, you know, and I've spoken to parents would tell me it's because I don't have kids yet. I don't understand, the timing it gives them. But some others I've spoken to will tell you, at the end of the day, it's cause and effect or cost and effect. You have to figure out what sacrifice you want to make and the implication of that sacrifice. Are you ready to live with it?
Can you really have children without making sacrifices?
Exactly.
You've got to choose.
At the end of the day.
If you decide to have children, from the moment you have children, your happiness will now depend on how the children turn out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see something that can be dangerous for your child, you better do something about it.
Even when we talked about, there was a while back, a couple of years, we had all talked about here talked about parents making time for their kids. And I remember different people shared sacrifices they were making. It was a doctor among all of us who said her schedule is crazy. But at a certain point, she had to make that sacrifice to pick and drop her kids every day. Because that time in the car, she realized they are so open. They are saying everything before they get home. She knows what she might have lost out by that sacrifice, whether it's the extra time that might have given her certain promotions at work, if she had put in the extra hours, or finishing one project in advance, or wrapping up early. Maybe when she gets back home in the evening, she still has to work. But she counted that as important. She had seen the impact, and she made the choice.
On this note, we'll be bringing this program to an end. I've been speaking with Onize Ohikere, a journalist, international correspondent, and we have been speaking about the future of iPad kids and what parents need to do, the sacrifices parents need to do. It will entail more time that parents should spend with their children. It will entail that when young people are going into marriage, they need to decide, as it is happening in Europe and America now, where people will ask themselves, should one of us not stay at home if we really want children to take care of the child for a few years before we go and resume our work again? Because what is happening today is that social media is taking over. And who are the influencers on social media? They will not be our best mentors.
Other young, confused, young
confused people are the ones that are the most powerful influencers. And we don't want to leave our children to be trained and formed by confused addicts that are often have the highest following on social media. We will need to come back someday to discuss this matter more.
Yes, Father.
Thank you very much, and God bless you. And we pray that our young parents will take the necessary action.
Amen.
So that the future may be salvaged.
Amen. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.